First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
I'm Greg Nebler. Thanks for tuning in. This is Fox 12 Now. Appreciate everybody joining us. Wherever you're watching, thanks for tuning in. Of course, we're on YouTube Live. We're also on all of our apps. And today we're going to be talking about the Bonneville Fish Hatchery, and in particular, the birthday for Herman the Sturgeon, the mascot out there for the fish hatchery. Of course, one of those great spots to stop off there in the gorge. We spoke to the executive director of the Oregon Wildlife Foundation all about it. So let's go ahead and run that right now. Here joining us to talk about this. I really appreciate you being here. We've got Tim from the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, and there's a bunch that we're getting to, including Herman the Sturgeon's birthday. So many things I've thrown out. Tim, I want to hand it off to you. Can you tell us what the Oregon Wildlife Foundation is and what it is that that's going on here this weekend, this big celebration?
Oh, I'm happy to do it. Yeah. Well, so let me start with the Oregon Wildlife Foundation. We are an operating charitable foundation in Portland, Oregon. And operating charitable just means that no part of our operations are endowed. We have to raise our budget every year. So, but our job is to help with fish and wildlife conservation in the state of Oregon. And we do that primarily by raising money and raising public awareness about projects that are important to the long-term conservation of our natural resources, including fish and wildlife. So that's the foundation, and we part of what we do. We have two gift stores. One of our gift stores is located at Bonneville Fish Hatchery, and then we have another gift store that's in downtown Hood River. And the sales from those shops actually help us in our mission work in Oregon.
And talking about conserving natural resources, and can you give some examples, I guess, of some of the different things that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So our interest is in the long-term conservation of wildlife in the state of Oregon, and so we do a variety of different projects that help in that regard. Primarily habitat improvement projects. So trying to make aquatic habitat better for salmon and other aquatic species. Trying to make our terrestrial environment better for wildlife, whether it's mule deer or elk or smaller animals, frogs, turtles, you name it. So that's primarily what we're focused on. And so what we do is we try to engage the public in an understanding of the importance of these kinds of projects, and we become a vehicle for their contributions. So if you want to support better habitat for wildlife or better habitat for fish, Oregon Wildlife Foundation is one way to do that. Of course, you can also contribute to your local conservation organization, your watershed council, whatever it might be. But we want to help. If you want to help, we want to be a part of that solution for fish and wildlife in the state.
Well, that's really cool. Working on all of those different projects. That sounds like a lot that's happening all at once. I mean, from all different kinds of environments. But talking about the river, let's go to that side of things, and the Columbia River, and specifically, I guess, to the Bonneville Fish Hatchery. Can you talk some more about that partnership and what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say we have been a partner with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife from the inception of our organization in 1981. So for 42 years now, we've worked with the department on multiple initiatives, including work on hatcheries. And in the case of the Bonneville Fish Hatchery, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but there's been a fish hatchery located at Bonneville for over 100 years, and raising fish of all different kinds, all different species of fish, primarily salmon, but the hatchery's been hard at work for a really long time. It also happens to be the home of Herman the Sturgeon. So there is a we helped build way back in 1998 the Sturgeon Interpretive Center, which is located at Bonneville Fish Hatchery, and is the home of Herman the Sturgeon.
And I have been there. It's something that I would recommend for every Oregonian to stop by and see, just because it's really interesting. It's educational out there. But tell us about Herman the Sturgeon. Give us the backstory of Herman the Sturgeon.
You know, it's what's most interesting is that there have been multiple Hermans. Let's start with that. So this isn't the only Herman the Sturgeon that there ever has been. The Herman and Sturgeon has been associated with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife since the mid-1930s. Somebody named Percy Southwick, who was the superintendent of the Roaring Rivers Fish Hatchery beginning in the 30s and up into the 50s, is purported to have raised a sturgeon on site that he called Herman, and then began bringing the sturgeon, that sturgeon, Herman, to the Oregon State Fair in Salem every year for well into the 1980s. Periodically, I talk to people, and if Herman the Sturgeon comes up and is referenced in any way, they go, I saw Herman at the State Fair. And they probably did, because he made repeated appearances there for decades as part of they had an animal exhibit. I think they may still have that. But Herman the Sturgeon was a part of that animal exhibit. They determined that probably shipping or transporting an increasingly larger fish from the Roaring Rivers Fish Hatchery to the State Fair probably wasn't good for the fish, and so set about trying to find a more permanent exhibit space for Herman the Sturgeon, and that's where Oregon Wildlife Foundation came into the picture. Through our working partnership and relationship with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, we determined that a good location, probably one of the best locations if you're trying to give visibility to sturgeon and the issue of sturgeon conservation, would be the Bonneville Fish Hatchery, which is one of the most visited attractions in the Columbia River Gorge that there is. And so the Oregon Wildlife Foundation raised about $350,000 through a capital campaign, and worked actively with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to both have a Sturgeon Interpretive Center designed, but also eventually constructed on site. So when people visit the Bonneville Fish Hatchery, one of the most popular things to do while you're there is to go to the Sturgeon Interpretive Center, take a look at Herman, maybe take a nussie with Herman while you're there, and there are, of course, other fish on exhibit as well, but he's certainly the main attraction.
What do you think is something that's really important that people should know about sturgeon conservation here in Oregon?
Yeah. Well, sturgeon, particularly in the Columbia River, sturgeon have been heavily impacted by the construction of the dams. So something actually I've been learning about as it relates to sturgeon is that they migrate. So when they're ready to spawn, they like to find cold and clean water, and they like to go to places that are nutrient rich. And in river systems, particularly with the Pacific Ocean where it is, the estuary where you have that mixing of salt and fresh water is some of the best nutrient rich water you're going to find, and that's where sturgeon would migrate. So in the Columbia River, sturgeon would go downstream when they were ready to spawn to find that estuary. And now, unfortunately, because of the dams on the Columbia River, what we've created is a series of compartments, right? So we've got a series of reservoirs because of the dams. So the sturgeon can't move from where they've been historically down to the mouth of the river. That's not available to them except below Bonneville Dam. So that's pretty interesting to me. The other element of this is that because of the dams and because of that compartmentalization or that making of reservoirs in the Columbia River, the relative water temperature is increased. And so sturgeon really like colder water. So warmer water isn't great for them. So as a consequence of the dams, we have a habitat that's not as good as it used to be for sturgeon. Then the other element of this is that, as we all have seen, if you're familiar with the Columbia River, actually any river with an outlet to the ocean, marine mammals like seals and sea lions, oftentimes we see in our rivers, and of course what they're doing is chasing salmon. Now, as the salmon population has declined, those same sea lions and other marine mammals have turned to other food sources, including sturgeon. So there's been increased predation of sturgeon as a consequence of a decline in salmon numbers.
What do you think some of the solutions are for that?
One is we need to make sure we're doing whatever we can to so we have clean water. So using less fertilizers, making sure that we dispose of oil and other things correctly. Avoid washing your cars in your driveway. Take it to the local car wash. I know it's going to cost you a few dollars, but that water gets cleaned and recycled. It's not the same as it running into our storm drains and then eventually finding its way into our river system. So that's probably the easiest thing that all of us can do, is just be more mindful of how we're using water, try to use less of it, and then in trying to make sure that we're not doing harm to our waterways as much as possible.
That's some great advice. I didn't even think about that with the car washing side of things. I'm sure a lot of people don't either, but yeah, it's going directly into there. Anything else that you think people should know about this weekend, specifically, with the 89th birthday for Herman the Sturgeon and coming out? What can people expect when they come out for the celebration?
Well, let me start with there's a little bit of a controversy about Herman's age. So we've been given various numbers. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife maybe has a different number, and we look at this and say, well, you should asking somebody about their age is really kind of rude. So we've been kind of avoiding the issue. But yes, we are celebrating Herman's 89th. We know he's older than 80 years old. We're not sure how much older than 80. So we're just going to call it 89 this year. It might be 87 next year. I don't know. But the important thing is Herman has survived another year. He's persevered and accomplished another milestone in his life, and so that's to be celebrated. So people come out on Saturday. The festivities, if you will, are going to start around 10 o'clock. It's kind of one of those kind of progressive celebrations, so you don't have to be there at 10. You can show up at 11 or 12. But around 1 o'clock, we're kind of going to wrap things up a little bit. Around noon, we'll have treats for kids that happen to be in attendance. There'll be coloring sheets if they want to do that. We have a Herman wandering the grounds, if you will, so opportunities for some photographs with a Herman the Sturgeon mascot. Of course, we want you to go to the Sturgeon Interpretive Center and take a picture with Herman. He typically comes to the glass. He likes the attention. So there's a great opportunity to grab an Aussie with Herman while you're there. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife will have a sturgeon expert on hand to answer questions, maybe give some brief presentations about sturgeon and why the species is interesting and important. So it's a little bit of a lot of things, but the public is invited to come out, and we hope celebrate with us Herman's birthday.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thank you very much for joining us to talk about this and just what your organization does, what's happening this weekend, why it's important, and everything that you just covered. Any final thing that you want to let people know about?
It's going to be a beautiful day. It's a beautiful Saturday. Come out and join the fun.
There's nothing quite like the gorge on a really nice day, too. It is.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's amazing. All right. Well, Tim, appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us here on Fox 12 Now. And yeah, thanks for everything that you're doing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. There we go. Again, Tim there from the Oregon Wildlife Foundation. Really appreciate them coming on, and that's something that you can do tomorrow. So right now, depending on where you're watching us, there's going to be just a little bit of a change. So if you're watching live on YouTube, That's fantastic. Great way to watch us. That video is going to end here in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to be ending that one, but I'll be continuing this broadcast over on our apps. You can watch on, it says right there, Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV. You can watch on our website. The stream's going to keep on going because we're going to take a look back at some of the big interviews we had here this week and some of the topics that we covered. So a lot of good stuff that we want to rewind and just revisit for that. So that's where you can go. Again, you're watching on YouTube Live, you'll see it end. Just hop on over to the apps, hop on over to the website, continue on. And in addition to rewinding some of the stuff that we talked about earlier this week, also coming up at 2 p.m., we have our standing feature, which is the video version of the Fox 12 Weather Podcast. Mark Nelson and Jeff, I believe, were in Phoenix for that one, so that's coming up at 2 p.m., 3:30 p.m., or 3 p.m., we have Nick Krupke, who's going to be joining us to discuss everything that happened with the Blazers yesterday and what didn't happen with the Blazers yesterday. So all that's going to be happening here as part of Fox 12 now. So I appreciate everybody joining us. YouTube viewers, I'm going to say goodbye to you. I'll see you over on the website. Everybody else, stick around. We will be right back with more Fox 12 now.